The river wasn't supposed to rise that fast. One moment the sun glimmered peacefully across the flowing surface, and the next it churned with a strange violence that didn't match the calm blue sky. I remember standing barefoot on the muddy bank, staring in disbelief as the quiet day shattered into chaos. Someone was calling for help, faint at first, then desperate enough to claw straight into my chest. When I turned toward the voice, I saw a girl about my age struggling near a broken wooden footbridge, clutching at a branch that looked too thin to save her life. Her face was pale, her hair plastered to her cheeks, and her eyes, dark with panic, flicked toward me with a silent plea that I felt in my bones. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and simple human goodness, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Stories of Kindness. Your support helps keep these real, heart-touching stories alive. Her name, as I would later learn, was Serene Halton, a name that felt delicate, almost poetic, which clashed sharply with the brutal moment she was trapped in. I leaped into the shallows, ignoring the shock of cold that wrapped around my legs. The water shoved against me like a living thing, but I pushed forward until I was close enough to reach for her trembling arm. Her grip was weak from exhaustion, her fingers slipping more than holding, and I could tell she had been fighting for far longer than her voice had been calling. It took everything I had to brace my feet against the rocks and pull her toward me, inch by inch, until her knees finally found ground. She collapsed into my arms with a sharp inhale of relief, her shivering body pressed against mine as though she feared the river might come back for her. When we finally stepped onto dry earth, she tried to stand tall, but I noticed her discomfort, her soaked clothes clinging tightly, torn by the violent current. She looked down in embarrassment, whispering in a trembling voice that the river had taken most of what she was wearing. Her vulnerability was written across her face with painful honesty. Without thinking twice, I pulled my shirt over my head and gently placed it around her shoulders. She looked at me with disbelief, her lips parting as though words were forming but didn't know how to escape. I only gave her a reassuring nod, turning my face away so she could cover herself without shame. It was such a small gesture, yet the gratitude in her eyes was so strong it felt as though I had handed her something far more valuable than a simple piece of fabric. In the bright daylight, with the river calming behind us, we walked slowly toward the grassy field nearby. Serene's steps were unsteady, her breathing shallow from exhaustion. I guided her to a fallen tree where she could sit, and only then did she reveal the true reason she had been near the river alone. She had come to that quiet spot to clear her head, something she often did when life became too heavy. Her family had been struggling for months, her father had lost his job, her mother worked long hours, and Serene had taken up small tasks in the village just to help keep things afloat. She had been carrying burdens far beyond her age, and that day, she wanted to escape for a little while, hoping the calmness of nature would give her strength. But nature had turned unpredictable, and her peaceful moment had spiraled into a near tragedy. Listening to her speak, I felt a weight settle inside me, a kind of understanding that came from recognizing struggle in someone else. My own life had not been easy either. After losing my mother 2 years earlier, I had grown distant from the world. Nothing seemed to make sense without her warmth, and though people said time healed everything, time often felt like an empty room with echoes I didn't know how to silence. My father tried his best, but grief had hollowed him in ways he never admitted. I spent most days wandering along the river, searching for something I could never quite define. Somehow, saving Serene felt like the first real thing I had done in months, something that connected me back to life in a way I desperately needed. As we sat together on that old fallen tree, the sun warmed the damp edges of our clothes, and a quiet breeze carried the scent of wild grass. Serene stared at the river with an expression that wavered between fear and awe. She told me that when the current pulled her under, she thought about her family, the responsibilities waiting for her, and the dreams she hadn't yet dared to chase. She felt an overwhelming sadness at the idea that her life might end before she ever truly lived it. Her voice cracked as she recounted the moment she let go of hope, until she heard someone calling back. She hadn't realized it then, but the one calling had been me. We spent hours in that sunlit field, speaking about life, pain, and the strange way tragedy can bring people together. I could see the strength in her, buried beneath exhaustion, tangled beneath fear, but still strong. Serene wasn't just someone who needed saving, she was someone who had been holding her world together with trembling hands, someone who had fought alone for far too long. The more she spoke, the more I found myself wanting to ease some of the burdens she carried. Days passed, and our unexpected meeting became something far more meaningful. We began seeing each other often, sometimes by accident, sometimes because one of us walked the long way hoping the other would be there. Serene regained her energy slowly, and though she always insisted she was fine, I could see how life still pressed heavily on her shoulders. I started helping her family quietly, offering assistance where I could, repairing a broken fence, carrying goods to the market, or just sitting with her father when loneliness crept too deeply into his voice. They welcomed me with an appreciation that felt genuine and warm. One afternoon, under the bright daylight filtering through tall trees, Serene confessed something that struck my heart deeply. She told me that in the moment I offered her my shirt, when she felt humiliated, exposed, and helpless, her entire world shifted. Not because she was saved from drowning, but because she realized someone cared about her without expecting anything in return. That simple act, she said, restored a piece of her faith in humanity she had quietly lost. She didn't look at me when she said it, she stared at the ground as though afraid to see my reaction. But I understood her feelings completely, for she had restored something in me too, something that had been drifting aimlessly since my mother passed. Over time, Serene began to change. She stood a little straighter, smiled a little more often, and spoke about future dreams with a spark in her voice that had once been missing. She wanted to study again, to pursue something she loved rather than settling for survival. It wasn't easy, her responsibilities remained, her family still struggled, and her confidence sometimes wavered, but there was a newfound determination in her, a quiet kind of bravery that grew each day. One particular day marked a turning point for both of us. It was bright and warm, the kind of day when shadows lay softly on the ground and the world feels gentler somehow. Serene and I walked along the river, not to revisit the pain of the past, but to celebrate how far she had come. The river seemed calmer, almost protective, as though acknowledging the journey from fear to hope. Serene paused near the bank, staring at the water with thoughtful eyes. She told me she no longer feared it, she respected it. The river had nearly taken her life, but it had also brought something unexpected, someone who cared, someone who stood beside her in the moments she needed most. She placed her hand gently on my arm and thanked me, not just for saving her, but for seeing her, for truly seeing her humanity, her struggle, and her worth. That moment carved itself into my memory like a promise. I realized that kindness doesn't just save others, it saves us too. By helping her, I had found a path back to myself. By lifting her, I had lifted the broken parts of my own heart.